back to March of 2000, on my spring break, where a lot of college students go wild and crazy, I went to LA to go to a filmmaking conference. And this was around the time when I was living. I stayed home for college. I went to U of M Dearborn, and my parents had grave concerns about the fact that their son was spending his weekends home writing, sitting there writing, and they wondered, like, is our son gonna live here forever? So March of 2000, I went to LA to attend workshops, and I spotted this attractive girl going onto the ET ride. So I kind of stalked her by also going. She was there alone, I was there alone. We struck up a conversation for about a half hour. We went on our separate ways, became pen pals. So then I'm like, hey, what a great idea, I'm gonna go to Ukraine and propose to this person who I met. So this is like March of 2000. August of 2001 was when I told my parents, hey, I'm gonna go to Ukraine to meet this girl that I only spent like 25 minutes with. And they were probably right to have some reservations. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But so I went on this 2-week trip and had this really amazing, surreal experience in this culture that was totally unlike anything I've ever experienced. And kind of had this courtship, had to convince her parents of it, and they agreed to me marrying their daughter. So in 2002, we got married. 8 years later, the marriage ended. So the marriage didn't last, but the story kind of survived.
So RJ, what do you think it was that compelled you to take the plunge to go ahead and buy a plane ticket and go over to Ukraine?
I mean, that's a question I ask myself all the time, looking back, because now, several years removed, I'm like, what made me do this? Like, it just seemed, why didn't anybody try to stop? Well, people did try to stop me, but I didn't listen. But I don't know, I just felt like, we became pen pals. We had this great sort of relationship. I didn't have anyone here that I had anything like that with, in terms of just sort of this great interchange between two people, and so many things in common despite our different backgrounds, and I just felt compelled to do it. And I just on a whim went and bought a ring and didn't really tell anybody, and decided just to go over there and propose.
At what point, when you start off on the journey, did you feel like, wow, I'm in for a really unique experience here?
Probably, honestly, just the idea of going to the former Soviet Union, I kind of had these preconceived notions, many of which turned out to be accurate, many of which not so much. But I think I knew things were definitely going to be a new experience when I sat in the gate at the airport before my flight to Ukraine, when a woman was sitting there with a chicken in a cage. I knew that's probably, that I wasn't in Kansas anymore, even before I arrived in Ukraine.
So we were in this village, and we went on this sort of expedition to get milk, and we had to go into this really dark, dingy apartment in search of what they called evening milk, which is fresher than morning milk. Anyway, I was like, what the heck is going on? So before we went to get the milk, Katya and Elena, which was her mother, decided that it was best for me to wait outside as they entered the small village grocery shop for some meat and cheese. While I waited, I noticed a goat chained to a fence. I decided that I had to take its picture. As I began snapping, an elderly man with a long white beard came waddling up, angrily waving his finger at me, shouting something in Russian. I basically said, "Niet Ruski," which means I don't speak Russian. I said, pleading my case, but the man continued shouting at me. Moments later, Katya came running out of the shop, coming to my defense, while Elena finished up the grocery purchase. "Is this your foreigner?" the man asked Katya in Russian. I'm not even going to try the accent. Which, as my wife knows, every time I try to do an accent, it always ends up sounding Indian, so I'm not even going to do it. Like, I tried British accents. Did he do something wrong? "Get him the hell out of here, that cheap son of a bitch owes me." "What did you do?" Katya asked me. "No idea, all I did was take a picture of his goat," I explained, gesturing toward the bearded animal. The man continued to yell. "What is he saying?" I asked. He said, "If you want to photograph his goat, then you have to pay the price." As in, literally paid money, or is he threatening me? I asked, equally amused by this situation. "He wants you to pay him money." "I'll butcher you like a cow if you take another picture of my goat. You hear me, you son of a bitch?" the man shouted. All in Russian, this is all translated to me. Which is always the joy of having to hear translations after the fact. Katya apologized, took me by the hand as though I were a small child in trouble, and escorted me back toward the shop, leaving the old man grumbling to himself. "Never do that again," she scolded. "Do what again?" I asked. "You can't just take pictures of another man's goat. Why not? I said in disbelief. Stop asking why. That's just the way it is. That doesn't really answer my question, I replied, standing my ground. You'll scare people, that's why. I'll scare people? Alright, so that's...
I guess after what you would describe as an unforgettable experience on the airplane, you finally arrive in Ukraine. What are your first impressions of the country?
Yeah, I mean, first I had to pass through passport control, which I thought for sure I wasn't even going to make it past because, they passport and they're looking at you and they're so many questions about why I'm there, who I'm seeing, how long I'm going to be there, how did I meet this person, and of course I didn't have my book at the time to say, here, read this and find out. So, and it just very stern in no sense of like, hey, welcome to Ukraine. It was like, why are you in Ukraine was more of the tone. So then I get through passport control and get my luggage, and that was an experience in itself. And then driving back to our apartment, it was just endless rows of Soviet-era apartment buildings. Everything was gray. These big giant pipes running alongside the road, kind of looked like a giant habit trail. But then things got different once we got into our apartment, just a sort of warm and hospitable, sort of feeling. I mean, the interior life of Ukrainians is sort of in complete contrast to sort of the public life and in the way they carry themselves in public. You don't see a whole lot of smiles on the street. In the States, people sometimes smile too much at times. But maybe, just the sense that like everyone kind of sticks to themselves, and especially if they know that you're not from there, there's always this sort of distrust. And I think, a lot of that's traced back to the Soviet Union and the paranoia that was sort of fostered. So, yeah.
Elena, the character in the book, future mother-in-law, she's cooked an amazing feast. And Sergei, future father-in-law, brings out the shot glasses, vodka comes out.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the importance of a toast in Ukrainian
right.
culture.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the title is Love and Vodka is a big part of the book. It is very much part of the culture, especially at mealtime, where you're expected not only partake in the vodka, but also to listen to a wide array of toasts. Every few minutes, there's a new toast, very eloquent, very oftentimes they're almost like poems. And all on the spot usually. So yeah, and then they give this great toast, and then you eat a little bit, and then a couple minutes later they pour you another one, and then and they do kind of give you a hard time if you don't partake with them. And they're not we're not talking about mixing vodka with cranberry juice. It's just straight shots, and I'm kind of a lightweight to begin with, so 2 or 3 shots in, you'll read in the book how the effects of the vodka on me led to a lot of the humor in the book. So yeah. I guess one of my main concerns is that people would perceive this to be like, oh, another spoiled, naive American making fun of another culture, and that by no means was my goal. In fact, if anything, I make fun of myself tons of times in the book, and sort of being this fish out of water, trying to navigate through the culture, trying to learn, how does this culture work? How do I fit in? How do I learn to make the culture work in a way that makes sense to me and isn't embarrassing myself or the people of Ukraine and Russia? So hopefully that will come through. Clearly, there's tons of scenes where I'm the one being humiliated, and I'm making fun of that and laughing at that. Hopefully, others will come on board with that.
So I think one thing that really struck us is how visual the writing is.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're reading the book and you're there. It's you described the scenes and the characters so well. Could you explain a little bit about the background behind it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the book started out as a screenplay. So, and then in screenwriting, obviously, it's very visual, but also very lacking in adjectives and extra words. So when I first converted from screenwriting to prose, like I did with this book, my concern was that I was being too short and sort of too much brevity with sentences, not being descriptive enough. But I think it actually helped serve the book that I could focus on being very concise with description without being too overly elaborate and too descriptive, and let sort of just paint the picture for the reader. So yeah, because it started out first as a movie script, I feel like that visual side of it is what drew me to doing it as a movie to begin with, and why I still think it would be down the road a great movie.
Oh, it'd be a fantastic
Yeah,
movie.
which
No question.
I'm hoping to still come full circle at some point.
So I came up from the trip August 2001, or actually September 2001, just before 9/11. November of that year I started writing the screenplay version, optioned it to a producer in California in 2007. I'm like, yay, my movie's gonna get made. Well, It didn't. It went through tons of rewrites, went through tons of development. At one point, the producer said, "Hey, we got these investors from Asia. Let's set the book in Asia instead of Eastern Europe." And I was like, "Okay." Do they drink vodka in China? I don't know.
It's so hard because sometimes I'll go back and look at what I wrote and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that or this and that. It's just some of these experiences just are ingrained in my mind as just surreal. And but I would say one in particular, the sobering method chapter, which is where you'll see the full effect of vodka and their attempt at sobering me up, which involves being stripped down to your underwear essentially and march back and forth on a rocky road, and culminating in a grown man's fingers shoved down, or several fingers shoved down my throat in an attempt to get me to vomit. And most of this had to be relayed to me after the fact, because I was, might have been possibly the only time in my life I've actually have come close to blacking out. I don't know if I did, but I would feel like this would, so.
One too many toasts.
Yeah, one too many toasts. They were beautiful toasts, but I, probably by the seventh or eighth one, I had no idea what was being said. So, yeah. So that chapter, it just,
Definitely sticks out.
yeah. But there's so many other ones. Just being chased by a babushka woman, but with threatening to spray bleach on me because I wanted to pee in the bushes and not pay to pee in her outhouse. There's the dogs being shot out of a cannon at a circus, and just
mundane, run of the mill.
Yeah, right. It was an endless stream of just what is going to happen next, and and it really, it's not totally unique to Ukraine. I mean, you could go anywhere in the world and experience things that are different from your own reality, or even here in the States, you could take a trip and see things. But
Sure.
Of course, being in a country where so few people speak your language and you don't speak their language, just adds to the sort of the fish out of water experience.
Definitely. I think one of the things that makes Love and Vodka so unique is it's not a typical travelogue. It has this, you've got the fish out of water story, but the underlying romance that really kind of holds the whole thing together.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it definitely encapsulates what it would be like to travel through Ukraine, particularly in Dnipropetrovsk, where it's set. But there is sort of a plot line with the romantic sort of comedy aspect, arriving there and then proposing and then having to pass all these obstacles to prove to her parents that, I'm worthy to marry their daughter. So there's definitely kind of this through line sort of as the spine of the story,
right,
combined with all the travel and from the countryside to the city life to everything in between. So,
right.
So I always try to keep in mind that I'm writing two sort of genres and then tying them together.
So ultimately, what do you feel you'd like readers to take away from reading Love and Vodka?
I think first and foremost, just sharing the experience of traveling overseas and kind of that whole experience of kind of being out of place for somebody who maybe has never traveled outside their own backyard or even their own country. But also I'm hoping that it can maybe inspire people to take that chance, and whether it's in romance or just travel in general, not being afraid to maybe pursue sort of an unorthodox relationship or just taking that trip that they've always thought about and never did for whatever reason.